Not a Tradwife or a Girlboss, but a secret third thing, Anarcha-Feminist. Written by the Ungovernable Feminist. It is no secret how unfavorable the last couple of years have been for feminism worldwide. Women and gender-sexual minorities across different parts of the world have faced the looming threat of their hard-won freedoms getting overturned. Amid the criminalization of abortion and the proliferation of Darvo narratives against women victims of domestic abuse, we are also witnessing the rise of an insidious reactionary trend, the so-called Tradwife lifestyle. In recent online culture, the Tradwife movement calls for the rejection of historical feminist achievements and the return to traditional gender roles. Despite the well-researched notoriety of 1950s housewifery in the US and the UK for its disastrous effects on women's mental health, Tradwives adopt this ideal in glorifying the wife's submissive position within the nuclear family unit. Aspiring, Tradwives embrace the absolute financial reliance on their husbands in exchange for the burden of unpaid domestic and reproductive labor. Implicitly or explicitly, adherents to this philosophy often promote the whole package of reactionary values, including nationalism, white supremacy, queerphobia, and science denial. In its essence, the traditional marriage and parenting model is the rawest embodiment of top-down hierarchy and intimate authoritarianism. Wife obeys husband, children obey parents. A traditional man's needs always come before his wife's, while children are mere obedient vessels for their parents' values, deprived of bodily and intellectual autonomy. Moreover, the prospect of having multiple children is romanticized with a complete disregard or downright denial of all the health risks associated with pregnancy and childbirth. To the apolitical eye, the idea of a modern woman aligning herself with these values might seem utterly perplexing. How can anyone feel the taste of independence and then just throw it away, deciding to slave her years away within four walls? Unfortunately, what makes the popularization of traditional marriage particularly dangerous is its attempt to capitalize on women's legitimate feelings of disillusionment with corporate hierarchy. While the inclusion of women in the public sphere is undeniably a substantial feminist victory, participating in the labor market often fails to deliver on the promise of genuine fulfillment and empowerment. In fact, the labor market under capitalism is where dreams go to die. The capacity to nurture steadfast professional ambitions in a capitalist world is often a privilege reserved for the able-bodied, neurotypical, mentally healthy, the ones raised in supportive environments, etc. For many women, the path towards the desired girl boss lifestyle is paved with persistent stress, burnout, and alienation. Coercion is a foundational feature of wage labor. The notion that a dignified livelihood where our basic needs are met is something to be earned is inhumane in and of itself. Work, as we know it, functions on the basis of an unadulterated existential ultimatum that has the capacity to suck the joy out of any activity over time, even the ones we enjoy on our own terms. The worker's existence within the corporate sphere is a tailored performance that alienates us from the products of our labor. Corporate hierarchy embodies various limitations, such as fixed working hours, deadlines, and strict instructions, that stifle our creative potential. This doesn't even begin to cover the arduous and hazardous nature of menial jobs. Now, let's get back to the anti-feminist response to the disadvantages of corporate culture. Traditionalists single out cis women, alongside everyone perceived as a woman in their rigid perception of gender, and try to paint us as uniquely incapable of coping with the universal struggles of wage labor. In this disingenuous narrative, they often employ bioessentialist points, arguing that we are unfit for work due to factors like our menstrual cycles or the so-called maternal instinct. In actuality, what makes women exceptionally vulnerable in the labor market is the patriarchal culture that permeates it, characterized by sexual harassment and gender pay disparity, among other factors. Conservative propaganda seeks to turn working-class women's justifiable discontent with capitalist exploitation into misdirected anger towards feminism and push them into an even less rewarding, unrecognized, unpaid job position, that of a housewife and stay-at-home mom. The main weapon traditionalists use while promoting the cis-heteropatriarchal institution of marriage to women is the false promise of protection and love. But, as Emma Goldman pointed out in her essay Marriage and Love, real love is exclusively free and can only dwell in an atmosphere of freedom. Being barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen is the last thing that would bring about women's emotional fulfillment and empowerment, or the disempowerment of capitalism, for that matter. As a matter of fact, conservatives sometimes admittedly state the need for new future wage slaves to justify their natalist agenda. For women to shatter the false dichotomy of destructive hierarchies laid out in front of us, we need an unapologetically anti-authoritarian feminist perspective that seeks to dismantle all forms of domination. A women's liberation movement that will not repeat the mistakes of the most well-known variants of feminism, such as uncritical validation of whatever choices women make under the patriarchal status quo, tolerance for red statism and great men worship, or turning its back to our trans and queer siblings. I have found a new hope for the preservation of these principles in a rather overlooked strand of feminism, anarchist feminism, also known as anarcha-feminism. In Anarchism, the Feminist Connection, Peggy Kornegger talks about women's intuitive anarchism, and the historically anarchistic nature of feminist consciousness-raising groups. Indeed, there is a parallel to be drawn between the goals and general perception of anarchism and feminism. Just as feminism is hated due to the prevalent hatred towards women in a patriarchal society and internalized misogyny, anarchism is widely vilified because of the aversion to all downtrodden people's liberation and the conformist conditioning even within marginalized strata. As an ideological groundwork for feminist thought, anarchism offers two core complementary premises that can guide women towards the deconstruction of hierarchical values within both the private and the public sphere: individuality and collectivity. Individuality serves as the perfect antidote to social expectations of sacrificial selflessness imposed on women and people perceived as such in traditional environments. It helps us unlearn the idea that the interests of oppressive social constructs, e.g. family, bloodline, nation-state, religion, take precedence over our bodily autonomy, especially with regard to reproduction. Collectivity, on the other hand, allows us to see the big picture regarding the subjugation of all workers under capitalism, leading to a revolutionary consciousness about our relationship to the means of production and a refusal to be defined by our position on the corporate ladder. Although witnessing radical social change on a global level in our lifetime may seem like an implausible prospect, anarcha-feminism can improve our lives through the refusal to be defined by our performance in hierarchical structures. Smash patriarchal mores with your selfish focus on bodily autonomy. Give your bare minimum in the pursuit of a livelihood you are already entitled to. Choose sisterhood and queer siblinghood over domestic servitude or formal productivity. No act of defiance is ever too small or meaningless.